Ron Paul coming up next here on the WGIR Morning Show. And because there is a number of pieces out there that are saying Ron Paul, it's amazing. The media is saying that the media is treating you unfair. How do you feel about that?
Well, it's sort of a strange thing going on, especially, after the Iowa straw vote, that there weren't very many stories written about me being very close second place. But then it turned out that they gave me more stories about why they excluded me. So it was sort of ironic. And I don't think it was a net harm to our campaign, because that was sort of an incentive to help our fundraising event. Sort of like when somebody came in and targeted our web page and closed down our web page, that actually ended up raising more money for us. So we try to make the best of problems when we get them.
Congressman, it always seems you're the guy out there with the flare gun saying, look over here, look over here, look over here. This is going to come true, and you did it in 2008. You've done it in campaigns before, but it seems this year could be your year. How are you feeling about your odds at this point? I know there's a lot of other people making noise, but, what do you think?
Well, they're obviously a lot better than they've ever been. I'm not going to overly brag about us on the verge of doing anything at this moment. But if you compared to what? Compared to 4 years ago or 2 years ago or 1 year ago, things are just changing so rapidly. People are sick and tired of the wars overseas. They're sick and tired of all this spending. They're sick and tired of the financial crisis that many of us talked about for many years that was coming. So I would say that in many ways, the problems that I've been talking about have come about, and hopefully they'll start looking for the correct answers, and that's what we've been doing, and I think that's why we're gaining momentum, getting more supporters all the time.
Now, let me ask you this. You've been to this dance before. What are you doing different this time around in the early states, particularly New Hampshire, to try and let people know not only are you in it, not only what your ideals are, but that you're really, it's more serious than it's ever been?
In some ways, not a whole lot different, other than just improving what we had been doing. But the big difference is the ability to get more people to come out. The other day when we had our opening of the headquarters, I told them then that I'm used to going to opening up headquarters. You get 30 or 40 or 50 people. Your employees plus your key and volunteers. But this time we had like 800 people show up. So it's a combination of us continue to do the same thing over and over again, continue to give the same message, but also, we do better ads now. We have better organization. I think we have a better team right now that's working with us, but we have so many more volunteers and so much creative activity going on the Internet that there's just a building of enthusiasm for it.
Now, Congressman, there's a lot of tendency among candidates, and we've seen it with some others, and I've called them out for it on this show, to kind of moderate themselves, temper themselves, bring themselves to either the middle ideologically, or just kind of, make themselves a little more milquetoast. You're not really doing that. You've never done that. Is that ever appealing to you, to just say, what, the heck with it? I'm gonna play the game a little bit more?
No, I've never been tempted, because it means nothing to be in office just to be in office. To be in office and not believe in anything is a negative. So therefore, I don't engage in it because I wouldn't feel good about it, and I don't think it's the right thing to do, and I don't think that's what the country needs. I think that's what the problem has been, that people have for so long just gone along and sell out a little bit here and there. People ask me, well, if there's a bill that's 70% good and 30% bad, why don't you vote for the 70% good? Well, how long does it take to get rid of all your liberties if you give up 30% every time you vote on bill? Eventually it's gone. And I guess you can get away with it for a while. Okay, we need an income tax. Okay, let's start at 1% on the rich. Oh, that's no big deal. That's going to help us pay the bills. But pretty soon, the assumption is that the government owns every penny we earn, and they allow us to keep a certain percentage under all their rules. So that's why I see this incrementalism being so bad. And if you give up a little bit of your liberties, you give up 100% of the principle. So once you allow the government to assume certain powers over you, then there are no limitations. So that's why I think you draw a very strict line.
Now, let me ask you something really New Hampshire centric here, because this is something that has become a pretty big deal in this state, which is the idea of either castle rule or talking about the idea that it really protection of self, in which the governor of the state, Governor Lynch, as well as the chief of police here in Manchester, they're both saying they don't like what's called Senate Bill 88, basically saying that under existing law, a citizen is justified in using deadly force to defend oneself or another in their home, but really doesn't extend beyond that. I mean, are you for, I guess, enhancing that law where the Senate and the House here in New Hampshire would like to basically see people protected from civil suits if they are defending themselves in what seem to be maybe a greater circumstance, maybe something where you're being assaulted or you might be assaulted?
Yeah, I don't know the full details of that, but
okay.
I have a pretty good understanding of what we should be allowed to do. So you say they recognize that if somebody comes in your house and threatens violence, you have a right, and you wouldn't be sued for defending yourself in your house. Is
Correct.
That the first half of it?
That's
the second
exactly
half is if you're elsewhere, if you're out on the street or in a store, whether or not you have that same right. Is that sort of the
basically
question?
Until the moment they attack you, you can't do anything. But if you see somebody, they're about to come after you, and this is a pretty hot button issue here, basically saying that they could sue you even if they're about to attack you. If you see like a menacing look, or you see somebody walking down the street at you, and you happen to be carrying a lawful firearm, and you decide to take action either preemptively, knowing that person's going to attack you. And it also, this SB 88, which the governor has vetoed, would strike the minimum mandatory sentencing requirement for felony convictions involving firearms and change the definition of non-deadly force to mean the act of producing or displaying a weapon.
Well, this is really trying to define something concretely on something that might be impossible to do it. But I think it's pretty neat that you're at that point of defining this. Some states won't even let you use a gun in your own house.
Gotta love New Hampshire.
So I think we're making great progress. But, boy, I think you'd have to err on, I think people could, err on both sides. If they're too cautious. But what if they use a gun too easily? And then, the police use this argument all the time. They say, well, he was threatening, and therefore I used my gun against him, and the person really wasn't threatening. So I don't know whether that could be reversed. I think my first reaction would be that it has to be on a one-on-one basis. But I don't think you have to wait until somebody pulls the trigger. But if there's somebody coming and they're about they have a gun and they grab your shoulder, or they just stop you and start talking to you. I mean, there has to be a point, but I can see where that's a difficult thing to write down precisely every incident. And I think this is the place where we have to say you have a right to defend yourself. There's a Second Amendment, but these details have to be worked out by juries and other people to decide whether the threat was actual or not.
I mean, and that seems to be the bottom line here about not allowing the attackers to file a civil suit if there is deadly force used against them, meaning they're being shot at. So it's an interesting thing. I mean, in general, let's broaden this out a bit, and this is going to be my last question here. But if you broaden it out to this general idea that that you have a right to protect your home, that if somebody invades your home, you have a right to kill them. That's something that's been threatened here in New Hampshire. That's where, the governor and others have said, maybe we're not going to allow that anymore. Maybe if somebody enters your home or trespasses on your property and you say, get off, and you warn them sufficiently that if you shoot them, well, then you're guilty of shooting them. I mean, how do you feel about it, basically castle rule, which is something that we took from England?
Well, there are some circumstances that you'd wonder about. Basically, if your life is threatened, your family is threatened, there should be no questions. But if a 15-year-old walked in your garage and took somebody's bicycle and you went out and blasted him and blew his head off, I think that's inappropriate use of force against a 15-year-old that's stealing a bicycle, even though he violated all the rules and also. So, yes, I think the retaliation of force has to be, proportionate to the threat. which becomes, in some areas, more subjective. I mean, you can't always analyze that because you might not know whether the person in the garage is 15 or 20. You might not know whether he has a gun or not, and that has to be sorted out. But generally speaking, if people trespass and walk across your grass, not too many people would say, "Yeah, you have the right to shoot them."
Right, right. Well, I mean,
that gets a little bit. Too bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely. And just lastly, actually, I lied about the last question. One last question. I just love talking to you, sir. One of the things is really just what is your, I know a lot of people, define you by the Federal Reserve. A lot of people define you by, taking up the issue of the Federal Reserve, taking up the issue of the Constitution and our government, taking up individual liberty. I mean, is there any one message, either economic, individual freedoms, whatever it may be, that you're telling people that is your number one priority when you get into the White House? What your number one priority is going to be?
Well, the general principle is protecting liberty and getting people to understand what it is and where our liberties come from, believing sincerely that if you understand this, everything else falls into place, whether it's monetary policy, economic policy, property rights, defense of oneself, contracts, the foreign policy. Everything falls together if you know that a person has his or her life and liberty, and where these liberties come from and not from the government. If this is understood, I think you can solve the other problems. The other thing is in combination with obeying the oath of office, which is obeying the Constitution. Even though I don't consider the Constitution perfect, I consider the principle of the rule of law very, very important, in that we shouldn't ignore the Constitution when we disagree with it. So it's understanding and defending liberty, understanding why that gives us economic prosperity, and also the importance of the rule of law.
Once again, Congressman Ron Paul, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. We'll be right back on WGIR.